Welcome. You're watching The Big Question. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. India's 2025 monsoon season has started early. In fact, the monsoons have arrived 8 days ahead of schedule. That's the earliest in 16 years. While the early showers have offered a brief respite from the heat wave, it's also perhaps set the stage for a host of economic troubles. The monsoon, often called the lifeblood of the country's agricultural economy, delivers nearly 70% of the rain that India needs to water farms and replenish aquifers and reservoirs. Nearly half of India's farmland is dependent on the annual June to September rains to grow a number of crops. But this time, the rains have come sooner than expected, and that's not necessarily a good thing. On the face of it, it may turn out to be a boon for certain crops, but because it facilitates their timely sowing, potentially leading to a robust harvest and increased rural incomes and demand. But unseasonal rains can damage crops such as onions and tomatoes in Maharashtra, leading to significant losses for farmers and a surge in vegetable prices. There are already reports of the early rains destroying 3,000 hectares of onion crop across Maharashtra's Nasik district, which will eventually lead to a hike in onion prices in the coming days and impact pockets of consumers. Southern states are also seeing a 30 to 40% price hike in tomatoes due to damaged crops. Thus, what starts as an early blessing can quickly brew into an economic storm. Similarly, the FMCG sector is also experiencing mixed impact of these early rains. April to June is the most crucial period for companies selling summer products, as this quarter accounts for 40 to 70% of their annual sales. Companies were hoping to reap benefits of a prolonged summer, especially after February clocked the hottest ever month. That's hottest ever Feb on record in 125 years. As a result of early rains now, consumer durables like ACs, coolers and fans might see a demand slowdown, as will the demand for summer products such as ice creams and soft drinks due to cooler temperatures. For rural markets, the situation is even more fragile. If rain remains erratic, the risk of crop losses rise, pulling down rural incomes and dragging down rural demand, effectively impacting sales of FMCG companies. Urban centers like Mumbai and Delhi aren't spared either. The unseasonal rains have disrupted businesses and strained already fragile infrastructure. For the cement and construction industries, the rains signal an early onset of the seasonal slowdown, cutting into construction activities and denting cement demand. There is also a larger macro impact of an early monsoon. While a well-distributed monsoon can ease food inflation, support agricultural output while also giving the RBI more headroom for accommodative monetary policy, this is dependent on just an early monsoon, but rather a consistent and well-distributed monsoon, something this early onset puts at risk. And that's the big question we're asking. Would an early monsoon perhaps do more damage than good for the economy, and how do we mitigate it? To speak on this, I'm joined today by Siraj Hussain. He's former Union Agricultural Secretary. Paras Jasrai, he's Associated Director and Economist at India Ratings and Research. Abneesh Roy on the show, he's Executive Director, Research, Nuvama Institutional Equities. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Hussain, let me start with your take on what we've been seeing. Early monsoon, is it a boon or is it a bane with the kind of monsoon we've seen?
Actually, the introduction you have given paints a picture as if, it is some kind of disaster. So let me assure your viewers that the rains have been excessive so far in some parts of India, but there is nothing to worry as far as agriculture is concerned. So let me give you only one data point. Last year, in the month of June, Kerala was 47% deficient. And by the end of July, it was 49% surplus. So rains for a few days in the early part of the monsoon do not really matter so much. In fact, they bring the good news that the reservoirs in southern states and western India will get filled up faster than usual. So on the whole, we cannot say that it is harmful. Of course, in some areas, the onion crop, etc., have been damaged, but on the whole, the sowing of pulses, etc., has not really started. And therefore, it should be good tiding for the agriculture sector if it stays well distributed in the month of June and July.
Okay, no, fair point. We have to still wait and see how it goes. But to speak about the immediate impact, Mr. Hussain, especially when we talk about the onion crop, the tomato crop, and the kharif sowing, what is the kind of impact this disruption could have?
Actually, Kharif sowing has not really started. Kharif sowing starts around the 10th of June because that is the normal time when the monsoon reaches Maharashtra, interior Karnataka, etc. So, in fact, the advisory issued by the Department of Agriculture in Maharashtra is that farmers should not sow their Kharif crops on the strength of the early monsoon. They should wait a little while because for the next 10 days, the forecast in Maharashtra is that it will not rain. So there is not much impact as of now on Kharif crop.
Okay, so there won't be an immediate impact on Kharif crop. Paras Jasrai, what is the picture looking like? Because we've already seen some impact on certain sectors, you know, whether it's cement, like I mentioned in my opening remarks, the idea that more air conditioners would be sold because we were having an extended summer, that picture seems to have changed fairly quickly.
Yeah, so that remains a big risk. I mean, if you see in last year also, when during the period of July and August, where we had a very high rainfall, the demand for all these products and also the industrial output had declined quite substantially, and that's a risk which is currently also there for the industrial output. Because if you see the recent time also, the growth of industrial output is just around. In fact, the latest data for April had indicated that the growth was just about 0.5% in infrastructure output. So, and with the kind of trend that we have seen in May, I mean, it does look like that the trend won't be very different. The growth would be very subdued in May, and that's a very significant risk, especially at the time for industrial demand, which is also facing different economic uncertainty at the global level. And yeah.
Okay, now just can you elaborate on that point? Why do you think this is a risk for demand right now, Paras?
Because if you see, already power demand has like fallen quite substantially. We saw that the April data for core sector had shown that there was some uptick in various. I mean, not a very uniform increase, but a very few increases in let's say coal, etc. But electricity, cement, and all of those sectors witnessed a decline in output. And in May also, if you look at the power generation data, which is there, I mean, that indicates that the growth in power generation, daily power generation is not good. In fact, till about 20th of May, it had declined by 2.1%. So that is an impact of the that you were mentioning about lower demand for ACs with the kind of temperatures that have fallen because of heavy rain. So that can have an impact on consumer durables output as well. But yeah, we have to wait and watch. But it looks like the demand would be muted in the recent near term.
Okay, so there might be a dampening of demand. Apneesh Roy, explain to us how this could pan out. Conventional wisdom tells you rains are good for FMCG companies, good for farmers, agri incomes will increase. But for the last few years, you've been seeing this pattern of erratic rainfall, which becomes a pain point, isn't it?
So I will agree to the first panelist. I will not be unduly concerned. See, whenever rains happen, the perishable crops, for example, onion, tomato, will see some impact. That is the nature of that crop. Yes, from a summer category perspective in Q1, for example, you did mention soft drinks, for example, other categories like talcum powder, fans, air coolers, room air conditioner, etc., will see adverse impact. But we have to see what is the bigger picture and for the full year. So for the full year, in fact, monsoon starting early, that does mean that we have more time for the entire range to pan out. And if you see all 3-4 forecasts from IMD, SkyMet, the European weather forecast, the Australian weather forecast, all have said that this will be good monsoon. I think that is the more important picture, and rather than tomato, onion, small disruption, that is the nature of those crops. Yeah, summer categories will suffer. So I see this as a positive, not as a negative. And definitely, if you see outlook by all FMCG companies in Q4, including even paint companies and liquor companies, the forecast on demand and margins is positive. So this is a short-term blip, and this is more of noise rather than any big worry for me currently. So I'll be positive on most of the categories. But yes, summer categories like carbonated drinks, talcum powder, ice creams, and the durables, which are summer categories, those will suffer in Q1. But FY26 demand overall should turn positive because of this good rains, which is very likely.
So this report, which has come in on the cement sector, this is also an important, just wanted your view on this, Abneesh. It's an INCRED report actually, which says monsoon onset has stalled cement price rise in South India. It goes on to say no major worries. That's because in Karnataka, dealers are providing discounts of approximately 10 rupees a bag on higher tier cement brands. So that is a pain. Same for Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. I just want to understand, for building construction as a category and for cement as a category, what does the monsoon onset actually mean?
I don't cover that part of the sector, but yes, again, this is very normal that in paints and some of the other construction allied industries, you will see this happening, and any investor, any analyst will see on a YOY basis. And it's more important to see that if there is a good monsoon, the rural incomes goes up. If there's a good crop, the food inflation for the full year comes down. You can see blips like the tomato, onion, but tomato onion went up to 100 rupees last year, right? So we are ignoring that fact. So these are very normal that in the rainy season when the demand will be postponed, right? This is not a perishable demand. Please note, the construction industry, paint industry is not a perishable demand like a carbonated drink. If it rains, our exterior paint is not possible, then they will do it when the monsoon ends. So it is just postponement of the demand for a full year. In fact, that's why Berger Paint has given a guidance of a high single digit kind of a volume growth at least. So this is postponement of demand rather than any structural worry for me.
That's an important point, that this is a postponement of demand. Those who have to color their homes or paint their homes will do it. Those who have to construct will do it. Maybe they'll do it a little later. Overall, Mr. Hussain, let's come to the point of why a normal monsoon would be so crucial for India right now from a rural consumption perspective.
Oh, it is very crucial because only about 51% of the cropped area is under irrigation. And even in irrigated areas, if the rainfall is good, then the need for electricity goes down. The farmers' expenditure on electricity goes down, so it helps. Normal monsoon is very important, especially in southern states, Maharashtra, Karnataka, parts of Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, etc., where the agriculture is rain-fed. And like last year, if monsoon continues to be good, well scattered, well distributed in time and geographies, then I think rural demand will continue to do well. Last year also, my anticipation was that rural will do better than urban. And I'm happy that it turned out to be true. So this year also, because the urban sector is facing a lot of problems. Jobs are not getting created. Jobs are not paying enough. Increments are not coming. In rural areas, if agriculture is good, then farmers and others dependent on agriculture will have some power to spend their earnings.
That's an important point. For the last few years, and in fact, we'll see GDP data for FY25 later this week on the 30th. But Mr. Hussain, this point that it's the rural consumption and rural economy which has been holding things up while urban salaries and urban incomes have slid.
Yes, in fact, in urban areas, the main problem, according to my estimate, is the very poor performance of creation of gainful employment, salaried employment, well-paying jobs, etc. Because the industrial growth is stagnating. In fact, the contribution of industry to GDP has been going down. So there are reasons to worry as far as the urban, more educated sections of society are concerned. Now, a lot of things are needed there. And on top of my list is the regulatory easing, because the burden on industry, services, etc., regulatory burden is so high that people are reluctant to invest.
some factors over here which are skewing that page. In fact, Paras, just right, can you come in on that with good monsoons? And we need to link it. It's the big picture at the end of the day. That's how the economy works. With good monsoons, you could see an improvement in rural consumption, rural economy, something which is badly needed at this time to compensate for what's happening in urban India.
Right, right. Yeah, if you see the growth pattern in the just ended fiscal year only, the first half was not good, but the second half picked up very substantially only because of the fact that rural consumption and rural demand had held up very well. And we have seen that the rural wage growth, which had been going in a positive manner for like 2 quarters in the latest data till February for the fourth quarter, that also indicates that the rural wage growth is real terms, it's positive, and that's a substantially good news for the consumption demand. And again, if you see, we expect the overall GDP growth to be also getting lifted by the consumption demand. And with the monsoons also being above normal, the agriculture growth is also expected to be good, near about the 4% mark, and that will gradually reflect in the way the consistent increase that we have seen in the rural wage growth that is expected to hold up well. And as Hussain sir has already said that that will definitely help the consumption demand get a boost at a time when urban demand is something which is facing some headwinds. And in fact, in the fourth quarter numbers, if you see FMCG volumes also, they have been driven mostly by the rural demand, about over 8% growth, but the urban growth has been over a fourth of that. So that indicates that how much the rural demand is playing the role in lifting the overall consumption.
So rural demand continues to be the driver. Just, Avnish, this is a space that you track so closely. Your take on the whole consumption theme, because a few factors that are about to kick in, including tax incentives, which were declared in the budget. That money now starts coming into people's pockets. Do you think that this is the time for staples to shine that have been sitting quietly on the sidelines? And especially after the commentary we saw from Q4 numbers, which wasn't that, the outlook wasn't that positive.
So yes, definitely staples, the time has come. If you see from a raw material perspective, even wheat crop is very good. It is at a multi-year high. Even palm oil, which had gone up a lot, and that was really troubling the margins for consumer company last 2 quarters, that has come off significantly. Third, of course, is what we are seeing is the 1 lakh crore tax benefit, which you just said. That also only 1 month the benefit has come. More benefits will happen. Yes, there are challenges in urban consumption in terms of real wage growth being just 4-5%, and rentals have gone up. If you see in most big cities, rentals versus COVID low, and now those would have gone up 50-80%. So that is one issue. But yeah, interest rate cuts also too have happened, and more will happen given inflation is coming down. The geopolitical risks are also going away. So urban, yes, my sense is for FMCG, from Q2, the urban green shoots will start, and we see rural still growing faster for the sector this year. So apart from that, overall what we are seeing, pricing growth also for the industry should be there around 2%. And we are also seeing that the new age companies, the D2C startup also, they are focusing now more on the profitable business model rather than just discounts. So all this, if I take an overall valuation comfort, staples and consumption will come back in FY26, and FI is also like that story, and FI is also, the inflows are starting to come, so that is also a positive.
In terms of expenditure patterns, Abneesh, I want to come back to you on this. We assume, and since we're talking about staples and expenditure pattern, and I'd like a view from everyone on this as well, we assume better monsoons, and we don't know yet. Let me say that the word is still out. This is just the first few days. Monsoons have come early. We don't know if it's going to be erratic, good, bad, or ugly at the end of it. We hope it'll be good. But we assume better monsoons, more rural consumption, good for FMCG and staples. Is that necessarily the pattern that we are seeing in the last few years, Abneesh, where perhaps discretionary spends are getting a higher proportion, and even for staples, you're seeing more localized brands getting a leg up instead of your typically big FMCG company brands?
Yeah, two, three aspects to your question. First is if you see 1 year back, in fact, rural FMCG was struggling. So we have seen a real revival from almost low single digit volume growth for rural FMCG. Currently, most companies are seeing in their rural areas almost 6 to 7% volume growth happen. Nielsen is also reporting similar number. So there's a real recovery which is visible. Yes, some part of the rural spending has gone towards education, better quality of education, better medical facilities, better hospital, better medicines. The telecom charges in the last 3 years has gone up because the industry has become more concentrated in favor of just two players. So that is also something which has gone up. But I will say that in spite of all this, there are many other macro which is positive. For example, exports is something in this tenure of Modi government, we are seeing exports being far more liberalized than earlier. So that is helping it, the farmer to get a better price. Similarly, what we see is a lot of the freebies, the state governments are giving a lot of freebies to the rural voters. So that's also helping. Union government is giving the free food and multiple other programs. And that's also visible in NREGS data, which is a proxy. That demand has come down because that is the job of the last resort. So if there is less demand, that's a good indicator. So I will say that local players in FMCG is very, very limited. If you see most categories, they have lost share from a longer term perspective. Yeah, D2C startups were a competition, e-commerce, quick commerce. There are a lot of startup companies which find it easier versus a kirana in terms of getting a foothold. That has been a concern for last 2-3 years. My sense is now with the profitability aspect coming into the picture, worst of that is behind. So that's why if you see most of the listed companies in the FMCG are acquiring very regularly the D2C startups. So Unilever acquired Minimalist, for example. Marico has done several acquisitions. So that will keep happening. So I'm not unduly concerned on local players.
Yeah.
D2C startups, the worst is behind.
And that's why you're seeing FMCG companies pivot accordingly. Just want your take on this, Mr. Sen, on whether we are still looking at the way rural India is spending from a very archaic point of view. Just assuming that if there is more income, they're going to spend on staples and very traditional kind of expenditures when it comes to FMCG.
Actually, the household consumption expenditure survey has answered your question. They have said that the expenditure on processed food, drinks, etc., as a proportion of the overall expenditure on food has been going up, which means that rural India is consuming processed food. They are spending money on not only the staples, fruits, vegetables, and cereals, but also on processed food. So, which shows that if there are surplus income earned by them, then the expenditure will come. But today I have shared a paper. I will also share it with you, in which has just been published today on doubling of farmers' income, and we have found that only two states, that is Bihar, Uttarakhand, and the Union Territories, met the target of doubling of farmers' income. No other state could meet the target.
Okay, so we might see a silver lining to an early monsoon as well. As we wrap up the conversation, Paras, your take on this point that we're making, that right now looking very closely at rural consumption and the direction in which rural consumption goes becomes very, very crucial.
It does, as I mentioned earlier as well, that not only in the second half of this just in the financial year, but it would be the same thing which would be playing out in FY26 as well. And that's where we think that overall consumption demand would be heading up good at about near 7% mark in FY26. And a key factor also, apart from the non-durable goods, is the other thing is also the fact that if you see services has a very dominating share in the consumption basket. It has over a 51% share in the overall consumption basket. If one looks at the recently released national account statistics for 2025, and we have seen that between FY 2024, the consumption of services has also increased, and that is what also has helped the overall consumption demand also to grow during this period, whatever growth there it has witnessed. And that again, I mean, we think that services also would be playing out well. So that would also be a very key factor for the consumption one, apart from the non-durable goods being better because of the rural demand.
Thank you so much, Paris, for speaking with us. Thank you, Avnish. Thank you, Siraj Hussain, for joining in. Early monsoon could have a dual effect right now. Bad for companies that sell products that do well in the summer. So think AC, coolers, ice creams, colas, etc. For companies that are in building construction space, for example, paints, cement, it's a postponement of those buying decisions, not a halt. But overall impact could be good, especially if the monsoon is not erratic. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of The Big Question. Thank you so much for joining us.